Welcome back. Welcome if you are new. This is my channel. We talk about. I didn't get my coffee. Darn it. We talk about global heating. I talk about global heating. Sometimes people listen. I don't know why. Honestly, why are you even here? It gets worse. Maybe after today you're gone. Maybe everyone leaves after today. After this, maybe this is my last one. We'll see. This hell. It's kind of funny. This hell lasts forever. You know that, right? You do know that. You didn't know that? Okay. Well, I guess I have some explaining to do. So I was listening to some YouTube channel. Maybe it was Peter Carter and Paul Beckwith. They were talking. But anyway, somebody, I'm not going to blame Peter Carter, somebody said, well, if we can stabilize CO2 emissions, the planet will start to cool. This displays a complete breakdown in understanding wordage and words, comprehension. Okay. There's a complete lack of critical thinking going on here. In one sentence, we'll say CO2 is a heat trapping gas. And then in another sentence, we'll say, and as soon as we stop emitting CO2, the world will start to cool. Let's analyze these sentences, shall we? Yes, I'm sounding like an English teacher because this is about words, right? How we word. Are we wording correctly? Let's start with the word trapping. What is a trap? A trap is a one-way machine. When you enter the trap, you remain in the trap. That's what a trap is. A trap does not let things escape. If it let things escape, then it wouldn't be called a trap. It would be called something else, like a door, right? Doors are not traps. You can enter a door and then walk right through and close the door behind you. Now, if the door locks, maybe you're trapped in a room. The room was a trap, but the door, by its nature, a door is not a trap. You can walk in a door and you can walk back out. It can become a trap if it only allows one way. You walk through the door, and then when you close the door locks behind you, and the mechanism to unlock it is outside. I trapped myself on my back patio recently. The outside patio door is locked from the outside. I'm not sure why, but that's what we do. Wife wanted it that way. The patio door locks from the outside. The inside door that goes into the house has a lock on it because it's a typical outside door. It used to be an outside door. Well, it's still an outside door because the patio technically is outside. So it's an outside door. It has a lock. It's never locked. We don't lock that door. We do lock the patio door. We don't lock the inside door. It's important not to lock the inside door because we store food on the patio. So we go out there all the time. So you go out there, and this is what happened to me. I don't know why I'm telling this story. Okay, I know why I'm telling this story. I'm going to tie this in to hell for it lasts forever. So I go out the patio door and I close the door behind me. I think because it was cold. So I just closed the door behind me and I'm going to be out there for a while. So I'm getting some food and I'm filling up jars and containers and I want to bring the food inside because we have kind of a larder out there. I have these big buckets. And I go to the door to come in and it was locked. It's locked. Why is the door locked? I didn't lock the door. Someone locks the door. Someone who's concerned about security locks the door. And I didn't know that the door was locked. So now I can't get back in the house. And I'm in the patio. And the patio is locked at the other door from the outside. Okay? That's called a trap. I'm trapped. Now, my wife pointed out, you're not trapped, dummy. You've got your cell phone. It was sitting in my pocket. I mean, I wasn't talking on it. It was just sitting in my pocket. You're not trapped. You just call me on the phone and I could come in and unlock the door for you. Yeah, I could have done that. But I didn't do that. I don't know. It was early in the morning. I hadn't had my coffee. And I'm an animal. Okay. I'm just an animal. I'm a big, dangerous, powerful animal. And my attitude about traps is fuck it. What is this? Just fuck this. And so I went to the other door to the patio and I just broke it open. I can do that. pulls the screws out of the latch. And I walk out. I come in the house and say, "Huh, I got trapped on the patio." My wife would say, "Did you have your cell phone?" It's sitting in my pocket, right? I say, "Huh? A phone? I don't know. Do I? Oh, yeah, it's right there. You could have called me. I could have let you in." So I'm feeling like a dummy, right? But when you're a big, brutal animal and you're in a trap, you just fix it, right? You just fix it. It's like, well, fuck this. This is no trap. Hold my beer. And so I'm not in a trap anymore. You can find yourself in a trap when you didn't know you were going to be in a trap. You just thought that it was reversible, that you would go out the door onto the patio and you'd come back in the same way because the door is not a trap unless it is. Okay. And what makes the door a trap, what makes a trap is that it's a one-way transaction. You didn't necessarily know that. You didn't necessarily believe that when you knew it, but that's what it was. And I was able to solve my problem with that particular trap. And there's lots of traps you can solve. If you're a bear and you're walking around in the forest and you put your foot in a bear trap and the trap closes on your leg and it's on your leg and you're looking at your paw, you can't get that off. You're trapped, essentially. The trap closes and there's no way for you to open it because it's a trap. You understand? We're wording now. We're using our words. We're using the English language. It's just the one I know. We're using the English language to discuss a word in the English language. And the word is trap. Okay? It's trap. A trap doesn't mean a bunch of things. It means pretty much one thing. You can go in and you can't come out. It's not reversible. In one state, you can enter. The state changes. And now you can't get out. Like the door that locks from the outside after you walk through. There's a state change. You can go in, you can't come out because something happened. Something mysterious happened. You close the door behind you, you hear a strange click. Wait, what was that? And then you try to open the door and it's locked. Well, it wasn't locked when I was outside. It only locked when I was inside. Yeah, the state changed. Now, if that door has done that to people before, there might even be a sign on the door that says, "This door will lock from the outside. Do not enter without a key." Oh, why would they do that? They'd be stupid. They'd be trapping people all the time. But they could do that. They could put a sign up and they could warn you, if you go through this door and close it behind you, you're going to be trapped. Walk-in freezers used to do that. Walk-in or household refrigerators had doors like that, where you could open it from the outside. I know I'm going on about this because I want you to think about the meaning of the word trap, okay? Old refrigerators back in the 40s and 50s, back in the day, had latches. Today they have little magnetic strips and you just pull them open against the magnet and it closes against the magnet. But the old ones had latches, so it would really close and no cold air could get out because democracy. So when people abandoned a refrigerator, they would leave it in their backyard, in their garage or whatever. Children, when they're playing and hiding and being kids, they would crawl inside these things and close them. And then you would be missing a child and you might not find that child until the end of the day. And someone might finally decide, we should look in this refrigerator. This door was generally open. Now it's closed. And you open the door and there's a little dead child in there suffocated because there wasn't any way for the air to get in. And that was a trap. Thousands of children died in these old refrigerators. And I remember when I was growing up, the admonition was, if you're going to retire this old refrigerator with a latching door, take the door off. Just take the door off. It's what's called an attractive nuisance. Children are going to hide in there. They're going to close the door, thinking that they're getting away with something, and then they're going to die in there because it's an attractive nuisance. Take the door off. And I used to see this when I was growing up. You would go into someone's garage or into their backyard, visiting some friend's house, and you'd see an old GE refrigerator sitting up against the fence and the door sitting right next to it because so many children died because it's a trap. Do you understand what the word trap means? I want you to understand what a word means, a fucking word, because no one words anymore. People don't understand words. They don't word very well. They don't think about words. Words are meaningless now. We're in a post-truth world. Words can mean anything you like. And apparently, the word trap can mean anything you like. Well, that's not going to work with me, okay? And so when you say, as soon as we reduce our fossil fuel emissions, well, reduce doesn't really do it. Let's say eliminate. We eliminate our carbon dioxide emissions. How are you going to do that? I don't know. Then the world will start to cool. No, the world does not do that. Well, it makes sense because it's CO2 that's heating the world. No, it's not CO2 that's heating the world. CO2 is part of the greenhouse effect. What's heating the world? The sun. Okay. The sun is heating the world, and the CO2 is a what again? What is that again? What's the word we're working on here? How we're going to word this? Let's create a sentence. CO2 is a heat trapping gas. It's a trap. That's what it is. They call it that because that's what it is. It's not a two-way thing. It's a one-way thing. Heat goes in and the heat can't get out. Maybe eventually, slowly, over geologic time, but no, it's trapping heat. And where's the heat coming from? The sun, not going away soon. Burning the CO2, burning the carbon fuels to create the CO2, burning the fossil fuels is not where the heat comes from. If you stop burning fossil fuels, the heat does not go away because it didn't come from that. What came from the heating is the creation of the CO2. And what the CO2 is, it traps heat. Now, it'll reach an equilibrium where it can trap heat to a certain point, and then the trapping characteristics of CO2 become saturated. And after it's saturated, then extra heat, okay, that's coming from the ground, from the heating of the sun, heating the ground and trying to radiate out to space. Once the CO2's ability to trap heat is saturated, it can't trap anymore. So that heat does get through and it does go to space and it gets lost. So it's not that it's in every way a one-way trap. It's not a mirror that simply traps all the heat until the earth is boiling hot and everything is melting. It traps to a threshold. Now, if you increase the CO2, then you increase the amount of heat that can be trapped by that amount of CO2. If you increase it again, then the amount of heat that can be trapped goes up. You see that as temperature. Your ability to sense that phenomenon, you sense it as an increase in temperature. The CO2 does not create the heat. The burning of the fossil fuels does not create the heat. The CO2 comes from the burning of the fossil fuels. And in the atmosphere, it traps heat. It traps it. It traps it. You have to understand the meaning of the word. CO2 and methane and others trap heat. Why am I making a big deal out of this? Because I don't think anyone understands that. It blows my mind. Something that seems really obvious to me. Oh, it's a heat trapping gas. Okay, fine. It's heat trapping gas. People don't get it. I guess they think that the CO2 is creating heat or something. No, it's not. It's trapping heat. Now, why is that important? Because as long as it's in the atmosphere, at whatever level it's at, currently 428 parts per million or something, and going up by leaps and bounds, by the way. As soon as it reaches a certain point, it can trap heat that is commensurate with that point until the ability to trap heat is saturated. After that, heat can escape through it because it's saturated. It can't trap anymore. But that's what it's doing. So as soon as you stop burning fossil fuels, the only thing you do is you stop adding to the CO2 in the atmosphere through that mechanism. And there's other mechanisms, by the way, that can still increase it. But let's just say our mechanism is now turned off. We stopped burning fossil fuels, which is like never going to happen. You just have to understand that it's not going to happen. You don't want it. I don't want it. They don't want it. Nobody wants this. Okay. So it's not going to happen. But if it did happen, this is a thought experiment. If it did happen, then the only outcome of that thing happening, which isn't going to happen, the only outcome from that thing happening is that our contribution to the greenhouse effect stabilizes. It stops. We were never the ones generating the heat. We were the ones generating the CO2. The sun was creating the heat. When it hits the earth and warms the surface, the CO2 was trapping the heat, trapping the heat. So when you stop burning fossil fuels and you stop adding to the greenhouse effect is still there. The CO2 is still in the atmosphere. It's not going away. And it will continue to trap heat until it goes away. And when does it go away? It goes away over geologic time. And geologic time, we measure in terms of geologic processes, mountain building, ice ages. Geologic time is the basic, the smallest unit of geologic time is 100,000 years. We don't even measure geological processes unless, and really anything less than 100,000 years, maybe 50,000 years, if you really fine tune it. Geologic time is like forever as far as humans are concerned. Forever. Mountains are forever. You can go to the Middle East and you can actually look for the very mountain that Noah was supposed to have, landed his ship on, his ark. You can go find the very mountain that Moses was supposed to have gotten the 10 Commandments. You can go find the mountains mentioned in, the saga of Gilgamesh. They're still there. You know why they're still there? Because they survived over geologic time. Geologic time frames, measuring things in geologic time, is essentially, on our scale, forever. The CO2, once it's released in the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels or anything else, and there's other things, by the way, we're not the only ones doing this. And we are creating conditions that add CO2 to the atmosphere that don't involve fossil fuels. We create those conditions, like when a forest dies from global heating and then it's set on fire, right? That shit's real. And there's other things we can do as well. Melting of the permafrost. That's real. That's a thing. We started it, but after we started it, it just goes. And how do you stop the permafrost from melting? Well, there are a bunch of morons who will tell you you can refreeze it. No, you can't. No, can't. Physics. Oh, well, we can just fight all the forest fires. No, the trees are dead. They're eventually going to fall down. Something's going to happen. They're going to rot. The wind's going to blow them down. They're going to burn. Whatever's going to happen. And they release their CO2, their embodied CO2 into the atmosphere. And that's it. That's done. Well, new trees can come back. Maybe they do. That's a big assumption. If the trees died in the first place, what makes you think they're going to come back? Whatever killed them is still there. They can kill them again. They can just keep killing them forever. The CO2, once it's in the atmosphere, on human time frames, human time scales, the time that humans react to, it's forever. And that CO2 in that atmosphere, that level, the best case scenario, the best we could hope for, the only thing that is even anywhere in reach in terms of the laws of physics is that we stabilize it. It stops going up. It never goes down, not on human timescales. It never decreases. Oh, well, we could do direct air capture. No, you can't. You can talk about it. You can have all these opinions and pull, unicorn farts or whatever, and you'd use that to draw down the CO2. But it's all magical thinking. You're not doing that. No one's really doing that. Not on a scale that makes any difference. And if you think they are, just look at what's happening with the CO2 level in the atmosphere. It's still going up. And look at what, how much CO2 is being released into the atmosphere. They can measure that because they know the sources of CO2. They know the human sources. It's all the power plants, the manufacturing, the ships, the cars, the planes, whatever, the trains. They know how much they know how much fossil fuel is being burned. They know how much fossil fuel is being taken out of the ground. They know what happens to almost every single particle of it. And they can calculate how much CO2 is being released into the atmosphere. They know. And the amount of CO2 being released in the atmosphere is going up. It's going up. It's not going down. It's not stabilizing either. It's going up. It's increasing. It's accelerating. Therefore, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere will go up. The best case scenario, the only thing that we have on our side is that if we completely stop burning fossil fuels, and if a bunch of other nasty, evil shit doesn't happen in the meantime, like the entire permafrost melting or the entire boreal forest catching on fire, assuming those things don't happen, which they could, oh, by the way. But let's just assume, again, unicorns and rainbows, best case scenario, rose-colored glasses, the whole thing. Everything happens. Everything, God loves us. Jesus loves us. Everything works perfectly for us. The best case scenario is we stabilize CO2 in the atmosphere. Currently, 428 parts per million. Best case scenario. Where it stays essentially forever for human practical purposes, forever. We will probably go extinct. Just naturally go extinct. I don't even mean atomic war. I mean, or some terrible pandemic or some terrible space alien invasion. Just in the natural course of events, we will probably go extinct before that CO2 is reduced to anything recognizable as normal. Bill McKibben created his 350.org. His organization is 350.org because when he created it, he thought that 350 parts per million was an attainable goal. Humans on Earth, ape descendants, part of an evolutionary chain, humans, Homo sapiens, will never see 350 parts per million in all likelihood. We will go extinct before that happens. Bill McKibben needs to rename his org. He needs to call it 500.org, okay? Because that's possibly, we could get away with that. We're at 428 and going up like a rocket. Look at the data. Don't believe me. Look at it yourself. We're going up like a rocket. Everything is accelerating. Nothing is decelerating. Nothing is stabilizing. Everything's accelerating. Line go up faster. Faster this year than last year. Yeah, 500 maybe. Oh, probably not. More like 600. 600 is probably a goal we could have. And when we get to 500 or 600 or whatever it is, then the heat is going to be increase in the atmosphere. The greenhouse effect will do its thing, okay? And it will, up here at 500 parts per million, it will trap heat until it reaches equilibrium again. Who the fuck knows where that's going to be? We're right now knocking on the door of 2.0 degrees C above pre-industrial baseline. We could go straight to 5. We not even stop at 5. We could go right to 10. That's what James Hansen thinks. You want some nightmare fuel? Look at the work he's been doing. The man's on fire. Pun not intended. Forever. And no, I'm sorry. Stabilizing our CO2 emissions, however you're going to do that, unicorns, rainbows, stabilizing our CO2 emissions, stabilizing them does not cool the earth. It simply doesn't. That violates the laws of physics. That violates thermodynamics. Oh, I just used a big word. I'm so sorry. Yeah, there's big words in here, people. Get your head out of your ass. Learn some shit. There are big words, and there's even worse realities. Worse realities. And the reality is, this is forever. Everything we do today, right now, what is it? It's April 26th. It's a Friday. Lots of things going on. People are getting ready for the weekend. They're going to do some grilling. They're going to go skiing. They're going to go up in the mountains, whatever. They got the whole weekend planned. Everything you're planning to do today, all the fun you're going to have this weekend, all the driving, all the flying, all the grilling, all the everything will be with us for all time on human timescales. We will be extinct before nature can get around to undoing the shit we did this weekend. Yeah. And every day after that, and every weekend after that, and every time you jump in your car and go down to Starbucks to get a latte, every single time. That act, the results of that act are forever. And you just have to understand that. I'm sorry, there's not going to be any global cooling. There's not going to be any, oh, well, today we stopped burning fossil fuels. Did you really? Did you really do that? Because I don't think you did that. But okay, for the sake of argument, let's continue. Today we stopped burning fossil fuels. Fine, continue. Today we stopped burning fossil fuels, and tomorrow the earth will begin to cool. Yeah, you're just a moron, right? You're just saying that because you're stupid. Because you don't really understand how any of this shit works. You're just saying things. You're just saying things. I mean, you strung together a bunch of words in a sentence, and you didn't understand that CO2 is a heat trapping gas. Well, yeah, but if we stop putting CO2 in the atmosphere, the planet will start to cool. Okay, you just believe whatever you want. You believe whatever you want. That's fine. Does that make you feel good? That as soon as we stop burning fossil fuels, however the hell we do that, okay, I would like a roadmap for that, please. Okay, as soon as we stop burning fossil fuels, the planet begins to cool. Really? You want? That's what we're doing? Okay, fine. Okay, good. I mean, it means you're a moron, but fine, be a moron. Maybe there's some nobility in that, right? Noble morons. Didn't we used to have noble savages? I think that was a thing. That was like a white thing. Demeaning so-called primitive peoples as being noble. They used to have nobility. Okay, well, let's do the same thing for the morons. You don't understand what words mean. CO2 is a heat trapping gas, but right over your head. Okay, fine. So it's not trapping shit. And tomorrow it all starts to cool. Well, fine. Okay. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't ever work that way. It never worked that way. It was never about that. Ever. Not once, ever. It can't be. It's impossible. You're violating the laws of thermodynamics. That is not how this shit works. It never cools. It never cools. Now, there's more to this than just wordplay. There's more to this. In fact, this is the pure nightmare fuel. This is the shit I have to deal with all the time. You want some nightmare fuel? Where do I start? And this is where scientists start to lose their shit. This is where scientists are like, you people, you have no idea. And I wish I could explain it to you, but I don't know how to explain it. Okay. It's a nightmare. Here's some nightmare fuel for you. Hey, maybe this is a good time to stop the video. So here's where I jump in and I say, I'm out here doing the best I can, right? And this is my therapy, right? I get on here and I vent, and but yeah, sure, more subscribers, right? Go ahead and subscribe, please do. And while you're doing that, be sure to like the video and maybe send a shared link to someone you don't like and ruin their day too, right? So let's spread the pain. Let's spread the wisdom that we're really fucking up. Thanks for watching. And this may be the point where you want to click away. Because now I got nightmare fuel. See, I had some nightmares a few nights back. I had 3 of them in a row. 3 in a row. Man, the second one nearly broke me. Fuck. Fuckity fuck. There's a mental health issue to all this, right? Am I right? I mean, protect your mental health. Maybe this is where you click away. Thanks for watching. I mean, really, thanks. Thanks for giving me your time. Your time is valuable. Thanks. Thank you. Leave a comment. Make me feel good about any of this shit. Spread the word. Get other people in here. Nightmare fuel. Okay, so it's worse than that. The amount of heat that is currently being trapped by the atmosphere. Remember, the level of CO2 goes to a certain point, and then the heat comes up to match it, and then there's an equilibrium. That rate at which that happens and the degree to which it happens is somewhat offset by natural surfaces that to actually absorb the heat. So we're heating the atmosphere, and that happens at the surface, and then the heat gets trapped in the wind, and it moves around the planet like this, gets distributed, and then sometimes the heat disappears. Well, it doesn't disappear. That's anti-science. That's against the laws of physics. We don't disappear energy, just like we don't disappear matter. No, my friend. It doesn't disappear. What it does is it does work. It does work. So when heat in the air is traveling across the landscape and it finds ice, it melts it. That's a phase change. Because water, ice is made out of water, has a huge specific heat, which it does. Then it takes a lot of heat in the air, and air does not have a high specific heat. So you need a lot of air passing over a piece of ice. Lots of air. It takes weeks to melt a given amount of ice. That's work. It does work. The heat in the air is transferred to the ice, which is solid water, and the solid water melts and becomes liquid water. That's a phase change. That's work. So some of the heat that we're trapping does work. It melts ice. And if you've been paying attention to this space, you'll know that, oh yeah, right, the ice is melting, sea level rise, and all this kind of stuff. Sea level rise is not your problem. It's a problem, but it's not the problem. Okay. The problem is that as we run out of ice, which we are, then the ice can no longer provide a service of cooling the atmosphere. You see, that's a natural service. We didn't invent that. That's leftover ice from the last series of ice ages. It's a fossil ice, essentially fossil ice, fossilized ice. So it's fossil ice from the last million years, and now we're melting it. Well, it's there to melt, so it's going to help cool the planet. Because when you melt that ice, that heat that was in the atmosphere disappears. Well, it doesn't disappear. It gets entrained into the water and flows to the sea. And that's then the sea gets warmer. Another thing that happens with the heat in the atmosphere as it's blowing across the landscape is it finds bodies of water. And it heats those. And water, as I mentioned a moment ago, has a very high specific heat. So, hundreds of cubic meters of air will pass over a given body of water and heat it up a little bit. And that heat is no longer in the air. It's been transferred to the water. Now, the water is not a trap in this case. A phase change of ice to liquid water is hard to reverse. It takes a lot of cold to freeze water back into the solid form. And where's the cold coming from? Well, it's coming from the exact opposite of the greenhouse effect. It's coming from air that has been exposed to space, and the heat content of the air has vanished into space. Now it's in space, but we don't care. It didn't really vanish. It's just not here anymore. It's not on Earth. It's out in space. So the heat from the air vanishes to space through radiation, not that kind of radiation. And that air is then cooled, and it can recirculate over the planet and pick up more heat and carry it back to space. So this is all the balance that's being maintained constantly by the Earth dynamic system. The water is accepting heat, and sometimes it dissolves CO2. And then the water can release heat in warm places that are cooler than the water. And the ice can melt and it take up heat. And in some other places, the heat that's in the atmosphere can radiate out into space. And this is really complicated gearing. All these things moving together and geared together and in constant motion. And by adding CO2 to the atmosphere, we're kind of nudging it in a particular direction. We're nudging it. And we're nudging it in the direction of less ice, more heat, and having that be forever, because we're doing it through CO2 emissions. And once that's in the atmosphere, you're stuck with it. Another interesting dynamic that happens. You don't hear this very often, but I've been hearing this for decades, that while it's true that the oceans, which are 3/4 of the planet's surface, the planet is still mostly rock. But if you look at the surface, 3/4 of it, of the exposed surface, is water. Water can absorb CO2 from the atmosphere, and it does this. It turns it into what's called carbonic acid. CO2 mixed in water is equivalent in stoichiometrically to carbonic acid. Oh, and it's an acid. Well, what does that mean? Well, of course, it dissolves the shells of marine invertebrates. It dissolves coral. It disrupts the reproductive cycles of zooplankton and phytoplankton because the water is too acidic. But that's not a one-way trip. The ocean at a particular temperature, put a pin in that. The ocean at a particular temperature can absorb a particular amount of CO2. Any liquid water has to be liquid water, can do that. Liquid water absorbs gases from the atmosphere, and they are in the water. They're dissolved gases. We know that works because fish swim in water, and there's oxygen for them to breathe. They have gills, right? And the oxygen, the water passes over their gills, and they get the oxygen out, and then That's how they breathe. They don't breathe, of course, but they have oxygen exchange. And that's how they do it in the water. There's oxygen in the water. And sometimes when there isn't any oxygen in the water, they suffocate, they die. So water can absorb gases from the atmosphere, certainly oxygen, but also nitrogen and carbon dioxide. When it absorbs carbon dioxide, it creates carbonic acid, which is an acid, does what acids do, right? Here's an experiment for you to do. And you've already done this experiment countless times and you've never noticed. Well, now you're going to notice because I'm going to tell you to pay attention. Go to your tap water, any tap, cold tap, has to be cold, not the hot water, has to be cold. Go to the cold water tap, fill a glass. Don't have to be big, just any glass at all. Now I'm getting thirsty. Fill any glass, a transparent glass. Okay, you can see through it. With cold tap water. The colder, the better. And set that glass aside in the room, not in the refrigerator, in the room. The water in that container is going to warm. And as it warms, being in the state of warmness compared to what it was originally, the warm water cannot contain as many dissolved atmospheric components as it could when it was cold. Cold water is more oxygenated than warm water. And when you take cold water from the cold water tap and you put it on the table and it becomes warmish water, because it's not hot water, right? It's warm. The trapped atmospheric gases, CO2, oxygen, and methane, nitrogen, CO2, oxygen, carbon dioxide, oxygen, and nitrogen, they come out of solution. That means the warm water cannot dissolve as much atmosphere as the cold water could. That's it. That's how this works. That's physics. That's just how that shit works. I'm not making this up. It's the truth. You can find it out for yourself. Go get a clear glass of water, a little tumbler or a mason jar, and fill it up with cold water from the cold water tap and set it out. You're going to come back in an hour or two, and that water has warmed to room temperature. It's not a big change, but it's enough of a change because when you look at the inside of that jar, it's covered with bubbles. Bubbles. Where do those come from? Well, they weren't there when you put the water in. There were no bubbles. The bubbles emerged from the water. The water, when it was cold, could contain a certain level of atmospheric gases, as mentioned. When that water became warmer, it couldn't support as much gases. So the gases come out of solution. They become visual. And if the gases emerge from the water at the surface with the air, they just disappear into the atmosphere where they came from. But if the gases are in the water that's touching the glass and they leave the water and stick to the glass, you see them. And that's called bubbles. And those bubbles contain some combination of atmosphere. So some combination of whatever's in the atmosphere at the time when that cold water was in contact with the atmosphere. Now, our water here comes from the ground, which hasn't been in contact with the atmosphere for millions of years, some of it. And it also comes from a reservoir up here in the mountains that is in contact with the atmosphere. So when that water comes down to my tap, it contains whatever the atmosphere was up there in the mountains. So the gas that comes out of that water is a sampling of the atmosphere where the reservoir is. That's what happened. Now, it isn't very far. So the atmosphere where the reservoir is the same as the atmosphere here, except for the levels of pollutants in the atmosphere. So the bubbles in the jar are probably cleaner, have fewer pollutants than the air around me because of where that air came from. It came from way up in the mountains where the reservoir is, and the atmosphere there is different. What I'm trying to explain to you is that water at a certain temperature can hold a certain level of CO2, among other things. But let's just focus on that, shall we? You'll understand better where this is headed. When you warm that water, the amount of CO2 it can contain decreases. And what happens to that CO2? When the CO2 is in the water, but the water is too hot now to contain that amount because it picked it up when it was cool water. But when it warmed, now there's too much CO2 in that water. So the CO2 level in the water decreases. It comes out as bubbles. It makes its way to the atmosphere. It comes out as bubbles. Now, why is that? Why does that matter? The CO2 in seawater is not trapped there. I talked a lot about traps. It's not trapped there. It's dissolved, which is different because dissolving something is reversible. It just is. You can do the experiment yourself, as I've described, with a jar and cold tap water. You can do it yourself. And when the sea warms, oh, hasn't that been in the news lately? Now, go read yourself some headlines. As the sea warms, the CO2 dissolved in the sea from the past has to decrease. And when it decreases, it re-enters the atmosphere. Basically, the stoichiometry of atmospheric CO2 becoming carbonic acid is reversible. And the CO2 can be re-released into the atmosphere. So this is where we have a nightmare. When we talk about CO2 levels in the atmosphere going up, because we can measure them separately from everything else, we know how much CO2 we're emitting because we can do the math. There's this much coal has been mined and burned because that's what you do with it. There's this much crude oil has been mined and burned because that's what you do with most of it, except for the plastic parts, which also eventually end up being burned. And this much natural gas was removed from the soil, and all of that burns or gets released as methane, which is just as bad as CO2. So we know what we're doing over here because this is business, right? Businesses keep track of this shit. Sales, right? Profits. We know what's going on. Everybody's pleased with their progress on removing coal and oil and natural gas. This is like a big deal for them. They're happy to tell you exactly down to the ton, down to the barrel, how much they moved. Very happy to tell you that. We can then calculate how much we released into the atmosphere because we know how much of all these things ends up being burned. And of course, it just all goes in the atmosphere. And then there's the level of CO2 in the atmosphere. And you would think, okay, extraction, combustion, and the final level of CO2 in the atmosphere, these must all be lined up. The CO2 in the atmosphere comes from burning of fossil fuels, and we know how much we're burning because we know how much we removed. So it's just line all this up. We know exactly what the parts per million should be. But what if part of the increase in the level of CO2 in the atmosphere is not 100% due to what humans are doing with fossil fuels? Oh, well, then it's not our fault. Oh, yes, it's still your fault, buckwheat. Pay attention. What if we're warming the oceans from the greenhouse effect? Well, we are. Go look at some headlines. Go get yourself some knowledge. We're increasing the temperature of the oceans. Do you know what that means to the dissolved gases in the oceans? We just had a big discussion about this. They get released. Some part of them get released back into the atmosphere. Oh, really? That's not good. Yeah, that's what's called an aggravating feedback. And the more CO2 there is in the atmosphere, the hotter the Earth system gets and the hotter the oceans get. And then they release more CO2 into the atmosphere, which warms the planet, which heats the oceans, which releases more CO2 into the atmosphere, which warms the planet, which heats the oceans. You see? Yes. Where does that stop? Where does any of that stop? Don't know. It could be a runaway feedback. There's no governor on this thing. There's no one, turning a valve and making sure that it doesn't get out of hand. There's nothing like that going on. This is completely reversible. And people, scientists have said, they started saying 20 years ago, yeah, well, let's just hope that, the dissolved CO2 that's in the ocean stays there. And there was a reason why they were saying that, because it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. We've spent thousands of years releasing carbon from various sources, including trees and soil carbon, and destroying these things as carbon sinks and releasing that carbon into the atmosphere. And that's been going on for thousands of years. And now, some of that carbon can start to come out of the oceans as we warm the oceans. As the oceans get really hot, the carbon dioxide bubbles out because it's too hot to contain that much. Yeah. How are you going to deal with that? That's going to go on for a long time. The release of CO2 into the atmosphere from what was dissolved in the oceans could go on for centuries. We could, unicorns and rainbows and rose-colored glasses, stop burning fossil fuels tomorrow, and it might not even matter. Certainly, things wouldn't go up as fast as they're going up now, and certainly, we would not be contributing to the problem, except that all the harm we've done to the Earth system is now causing things to happen outside of our realm of control. We can kind of control our fossil fuel consumption, except that we're a bunch of moron chimps and we just want the banana, right? We just want the banana and don't worry about the harm to the system from me wanting all the bananas. And so we just take all the bananas, eat all the bananas, shit all over everything. And then we come back later and say, oh, greenhouse effect. Interesting. Global heating. That's also interesting. Is that a thing? That's really a thing? And that's from me just being a moron chimp and having all the bananas? Oh, okay, fine. I guess I'm a moron then. But I'm a rich moron, so whatever, right? And we can stop doing that. We have control over whether we're going to eat all the bananas and emit all the CO2. We could, theory, stop being moron chimps and do something about that. We could. We could have a complete collapse of the global industrialized civilization. That would work. We could have a small-scale nuclear war. We could have a massive pandemic on the level of the Black Death or the Spanish flu, which had nothing to do with Spain. Don't blame the Spanish for that. That shit came from Kansas. The 1918 pandemic, Spanish flu, so-called. We could have that again, right? What if it was even worse? We have an H5N1 virus right now making its way through the U.S. agriculture system. Boy, they're watching that one close. The H5N1 viruses can fuck you up. What if we had one of those? What if the lethality was 50 or 60 or 80%? What if the virality, the ability to spread, was really, really great? What if they couldn't come up with a vaccine very quickly? What if people refused the vaccine? Americans probably would. Some other people might too. So even if you had a vaccine or could come up with one, what if nobody wanted to take it because you're chipping me or something? All right. And so it just we could have a massive collapse of civilization. Enough people get sick. They can't manage the oil platforms. They can't fix the pipelines when they break. They can't fix the electrical lines when they go down in a storm. Enough people are not functioning and for long enough a period of time that pretty soon things just kind of grind to a halt. And then now they're halted. And now I can't go fix the wires because I got no food and I got no fuel for my truck. And because the tankers didn't arrive. And wow, this is really interesting. We just had 6 months of pandemic and we lost a third of the human population and now everything is stopped and we don't know how to restart it. And a lot of the people that know how to restart things are also dead. So what are we going to do? Fuck me. That could happen. And we could stop burning fossil fuels. Sure. I'm currently writing the book on how that happens. Almost ready for another installment, by the way. Episode 4. Things get better-ish. So when someone tells you, oh, yes, well, we'll just stop emitting, we'll just curb carbon dioxide emissions and the earth will start to cool. No, that is not how it works. And even if you could magically stop carbon emissions, which means you're going to magically stop burning fossil fuels, and you stabilize CO2 levels in the atmosphere, that doesn't really do it for you. Because now the forests might burn, increasing CO2 in the atmosphere, and the oceans might warm and release CO2 into the atmosphere. And the current level of global heating might trigger a massive thaw in the permafrost. And therefore reduce methane and eventually CO2 into the atmosphere and nitrous oxides. And of course, the heat is always looking for some work to do. So if it can find any ice and melt that, then you decrease your albedo and you raise sea levels and, you can't cool the planet quite as effectively as you did. So now not only is your CO2 level, not going down, which you can't do except in geologic time scales, it's not going down. Then the amount of heating can go up because there's no ice to reflect the sunlight and there's no ice to melt to absorb the heat. So you could really screw yourself over. You could actually stop burning fossil fuels today somehow. Global war, pandemic, I don't know. You could stop burning fossil fuels today and still be screwed. In fact, that's exactly what would happen. Everything I just described is not like theoretical. Everything I just described would happen because that's how this shit works. And I know the scientists aren't going on CNN and Times magazine and explaining to everyone the Earth system dynamics and how this shit actually works and what is the meaning of geological timescales and how can you remove CO2 and what role does weathering of mountains have to do with it? They could, but they're not going to. For one thing, it's a career-ending move. Everyone knows that. I know that. They know that. They're not going to do that. And second, they're not going to be invited. You don't just walk into CNN, walk up to the microphone and say, yeah, I'm going to lay down some truth bombs on you fuckers. That's not how that works. You have to get invited in. And when they invite you in, it's because you've written a book that says nice things, talks about rainbows and unicorns. Okay? Not because you wrote something that sounded dystopian and terrifying and nightmare fuel. They're not going to invite that person in and sit them down in the comfy chair with the comfy host and talk about comfortable things. That's if you're writing the book about how this really works, they're not going to platform your ass. In fact, if that's what you're doing, you're probably going to lose your grants, you're going to lose your funding, you're going to lose your chair at the university, you're going to lose your students, you're going to lose your publisher, you're going to lose everything. You know, and what do? You sell cars? Who's going to do that? Who's signing up for that shit? I can sit here and do this. I can talk smack. I can sit here and tell you how this works. Just lay it out. This is how it works, folks. It's not going to be good. It's forever. You're not going to change it. You can't change it, number one. And if you did, you know, unicorns and rainbows, it doesn't change anything because this is forever. Remember the title of this video? This hell is forever. It's forever. And I'm not saying that because I'm a crank living in a cabin in the woods. I'm saying that because I'm a scientist and I'm retired. I don't have to carry water for any of these people. They're not going to invite me on to CNN. You're not even going to subscribe. You're not even going to give me a like. Okay. But I don't care. I don't have to make you happy. Do I have any obligations at all? Be on here at all? Say anything? No, nothing. I'm here because it's reality. It's true. And you should know. Maybe that's my responsibility as a scientist, is to make sure that you understand. I can't change you. I can't change the system I'm embedded in. It's working for me anyway, so why would I want to change it? You don't want to change it either. So we're not going to change it. Let's just agree together as friends, having a beer. I wish. Friends together having a beer and talking shit, that we're not going to change this. Let's just agree on that. No one's changing it. No one can change it. It can't be changed. It just has to collapse. Fuck, whatever. I don't know. How's that happen? Lots of ways, I suppose, that happens. But anyway, that's the only way it changes is it collapses on its own and we all get taken by surprise. And I'm writing the book on that right now. And I'm going to read episode 4 shortly. And whatever hell we're creating for ourselves is forever. It's forever. People get tripped up on the word trap. CO2 is a heat trapping gas. It traps heat. That's forever on human timescales. For timescales that matter to humans, it's forever. Don't get pedantic on me, son of a bitch. It's for our purposes, it's forever. Okay. We will be extinct probably before we get back to 350 parts per million in all likelihood. Think whatever you like. Magical thinking, unicorns. I don't care. This is how it works. Doesn't work another way. If you have another way it works, get in the comments and explain your shit to me. Maybe I'll be amused. And the other word you have to understand, in addition to the word trapped, is forever. I don't know what we're creating. We won't. This is an experiment we've never done before. You know, precautionary principle. If you're going to do an experiment you've never done before, which could have had deleterious effects on you or the people in your lab, like explosions, or you know, a bioweapon, or nerve agent or something you've never heard of, but that's kind of what you're veering towards. Well, then maybe you should exercise some, oh, I don't know, caution. How about just be cautious at that point? We're running an experiment in atmosphere in Earth system dynamics on the only planet where we can live, the only one. The best analogy is that we are setting our house on fire. We're experimenting with fire in the house. We're going to barbecue in the house. We're going to set up a campfire right here on the floor. I got a wooden floor. Should be great. We'll set up a campfire and we'll just see what happens. I want to roast marshmallows over the campfire. So I'll just do it right here in the house. You're conducting an experiment. We're conducting an experiment in our house, the only house we have. The Earth system, the whole thing. It's a system, by the way. It's not the Earth. It's not a rock. It's a whole system. And we're conducting an experiment at the systems level. We have no idea what we're doing. We're no more capable of doing this than a toddler is capable of, working with high explosives. Yeah, you can give high explosives to a toddler, and then you should be probably 200 feet away when you do it. We're experimenting with the only home we have, which is a complex system of interconnected gears, and we're messing with it. And, it could become hell for most of us. It could become hell for all of us. I have some thoughts about extinction level events. I don't think humans are going extinct, but hey, we could have a 99% die off. I can calculate that on the back of an envelope. I can come up with that number and justify that one real fast. A 99% die off. Well, that's interesting. Could do that. That'd be bad. Forever. I don't know what to say. We're doing it. Buckle up. It's going to be bumpy.